Hi people, welcome to the Run Testers and our first look at the new COROS Pace 3. Now we were big fans of the Pace 2, bang for buck, one of the best GPS running watches going, so we've been excited to test this new successor. We'll bring you our complete considered multi-tester review once we've done our full rigorous tests, but in this video we're going to give you a quick snapshot of what's new, along with some early first impressions on how the new COROS Pace 3 performs, including design, GPS, heart rate and battery life in our early tests. So let's get into it. So what's new then? Well, the top line upgrades from the Pace 2 include a bigger battery life, the addition of all systems and dual frequency GPS. There's a new trail running mode, though that will come to the Pace 2 in time. There's a pulse oximeter sensor, plus music storage and playback with 4 gigabytes of space. Now COROS's trademark is long battery life, and with the Pace 3 they've also improved things here again. On paper, in standard GPS mode you're going to get 38 hours run time. With all system satellites on you're going to get 25 hours, and in dual frequency that drops to 15 hours. The daily use battery life is now 24 hours, that's 4 days longer than the Pace 2. Design wise, there's a 1.2 inch transflective 240 by 240 memory and pixel always on touchscreen display. That's the same size and resolution as the Pace 2, but COROS says it's higher quality. That's also scratch resistant glass, which sits in a lightweight fibre reinforced polymer bezel and casing. Now the Pace 3 weighs 30 grams with a nylon strap on. That's 1 gram heavier than the Pace 2, but only 1 gram, so you're barely going to notice that. There's also Bluetooth 5.0, a 4 gigabyte memory, and it's water resistant to 50 meters. When it comes to sensors, there's a smaller optical HR with less bulge, which is supposed to be for a better fit and improved comfort. You're also now getting SpO2. There's also a barometric altimeter in there. When it comes to tracking and features, the big news is the addition of some new sport modes. That includes trail running, ski, snowboard and cross-country ski, but those, like I said earlier, will come to the Pace 2 by 2024. Otherwise, there's the same suite of Evo Lab training, recovery and fitness insights, plus the usual sleep, activity tracking and all of those gubbins that come with the old Pace 2. Navigation smarts includes in-app route planning, turn-by-turn navigation, breadcrumb navigation, back to start, elevation profile. You've got distance to destination, GPS coordinates and storm alerts as well. There's not much here by way of smartwatch smarts. There's notifications to music, those kind of things, bit of watch face customization, but there's no contactless payments and no Spotify playback. On price, the COROS Pace 3 will cost $229 in the US, £219 in the UK. That's $50 and £20 pricier than the Pace 2 at launch, but still considerably cheaper than things like the Garmin Forerunner 265, which is probably the closest rival when it comes to overall capabilities of this watch. Now when it comes to the run test, we've only had the COROS Pace 3 for just under a week really, so we haven't had it a full time to test it, but here is what we have found out in the miles that we've done. Let's start with the design. Well, this is a light and compact watch. The nylon strap isn't the softest, not quite as soft as some of those Apple ones you get, but overall it's nice and comfortable to wear. It's easy to have on 24/7 and you kind of forget that it's there. That's how lightweight it is. You can change those straps as well, and it ships with 2 spare pins, which I think is a good thing, because I'm a little bit worried actually overall about how strong these pins are. Sometimes when you're pulling that strap tight, they feel a bit flimsy. Now the screen is pretty small, but this is a compact watch. It's also no match for the brightest and sharpest displays either. That's somewhere the Forerunner 965 is going to have an edge, but it's perfectly legible in most lights. Though the auto raise backlight was a bit hit and miss, it didn't always fire when we lifted our wrists. Overall, the design is tidy. It's not a great deal has changed here from the Pace 2. It's still perhaps a little bit plastic feeling, but that is what keeps it light, and I think it's actually a benefit really.
So in terms of the design of the COROS Pace 3, it's not too far removed from the Pace 2, which I actually think is a good thing, and there's just kind of some minor changes that might be a big deal for some, not so for others. I think first starting off, you're getting a similar size case. The screen size and resolution has stayed the same as well. You're getting that plastic case as well, which maybe feels a touch nicer than the one on the original Pace 2. You're getting the same setup in terms of buttons. Now what you have got here is the added touchscreen functionality, which we've seen on other COROS watches. Now you can set that to be used all the time when you're interacting with the watch, or you can be more selective in terms of the kind of menus and features that it's kind of assigned to. So if that's something you want, then that's something you've got there as well too. In terms of the straps, there is kind of the nylon and the silicone strap option. I had the nylon, and COROS also sent me the silicone version, but I actually actually found the nylon strap a lot nicer to wear a couple of days that I've had using it, and also it's definitely a nicer nylon strap than I had on the Pace 2, which I think was one of the early versions when they kind of sent us the early kind of test units to use on the Pace 2. Another thing worth mentioning here that I've kind of noticed in my time is the software seems to run a little bit smoother than it did on the Pace 2. Just seems a little bit slicker, doesn't feel as laggy. I mean, it wasn't massively laggy on the Pace 2, but it is something that I've kind of noticed it is a little bit slicker overall. So from that point of view, interacting with it day to day and kind of, you know, going through those menus, it does feel a little bit nicer to do. So yeah, ultimately very similar to what we got on the Pace 2 in terms of the size, in terms of the screen, kind of setup of the straps. So ultimately you're looking at that kind of touchscreen functionality added, and I think in terms of processor kind of performance and overall performance in terms of interacting with the watch, it definitely feels a lot nicer, a lot more smoother overall.
Now on battery life, in my early tests, the battery life was solid. The overnight burn averaged around 3%, that's really good. It talked about 30% in 3 days of general use. That included 8 hours of GPS tracking, which also broke down as burning 8% from 2.5 hours in standard GPS. Oddly, burned 7% from 4.5 hours in an all systems GPS run, while 1 hour dual frequency exercise burned 4%. Now those numbers should roughly scale to the matched build battery times, which is good, but more testing to be done.
Okay, so into battery life on the COROS Pace 3, I think in general we should say that kind of COROS watches, that's, you know, this is something that's been renowned for, whether it's kind of in, you know, tracking mode, but also in standby mode, the battery life has always been very strong across its range. Now, in terms of what we're seeing on the Pace 3, we are seeing promising improvements in terms of that day-to-day battery life, kind of, you know, kind of daily use, smartwatch mode. We are also seeing improvements in terms of that kind of standard GPS battery mode as well. And now also you have the dual band GPS mode, which, like other watches that support these types of kind of dual band mode, does see the battery life drop off a little bit more compared to when you're kind of using it in the standard GPS mode. So I think that the COROS Pace 3 promises kind of up to 15 hours of kind of dual band GPS battery life. Now I did just over an hour of running basically in my first run with it. I saw the battery life drop by 8%, so maybe that's kind of, you know, just over 10 hours I think it kind of works out to in terms of that kind of dual band GPS battery life performance. So not quite maybe the 15 hours, but it's going to be over 10 hours I think ultimately. But what's clear is that having that kind of higher accuracy mode in play does impact on the battery life. And you know, think of things that I've used recently like the Cinto Vertical, where it's held that battery life a lot better in the kind of dual band mode, probably the best than any watch that I've tried in that dual band mode. But it's kind of in line with other watches that offer this kind of support. So from that point of view, in that highest accuracy mode, you are going to see the battery life drop off compared to standard mode. It looks like from a kind of day-to-day use, you're going to get kind of a few more days out of it as well. So crucially, you are seeing improvements on kind of all fronts in terms of that battery life, in terms of what's promised, and also like the dual band mode on other watches, it looks like it's going to hit the battery life a little bit more, but that's kind of not really massively surprising based on the testing of other watches with that kind of dual band mode as well.
On GPS, in these early tests, this was a bit hit and miss. In a standard GPS mode, it had a tendency to read long compared to the Garmin Enduro 2. And when you look at the tracks, even in dual frequency, it has a habit of meandering slightly. They go a little bit off. It's nothing too crazy, just small bits here and there, but these little bits add up, particularly when you're going longer distances. And the Pace 3 was often 1/4 of a mile ahead of the other 2 or 3 watches that we tested it against. Now, these were much pricier watches in general. On one occasion, it also struggled really badly with the stop. It bounced around, adding distance. It's not unique to the Pace 3. It happened to the Garmin Enduro 2 in our tests, but it might not be that great if you're thinking of using this for ultra and you're going to be doing aid station stops without pausing your watch. It was much better in dual frequency mode, where it matched the Garmin Enduro dual frequency overall, much better for accuracy in that mode, and you know, matching pricier watches.
Okay, so into GPS performance, and that is a big kind of headline change for the COROS Pace 3 as well. You now have the dual frequency GPS mode that we've seen on the kind of COROS Apex 2 and on the COROS Vertix 2, and obviously a lot of other kind of running watches from Garmin, from Polar, from Cinto as well. Now I've seen kind of varying experiences and performances of those kind of dual band kind of GPS modes on all of those watches. I think it's been okay on the COROS watches in general, but I think, you know, probably Garmin and Suunto probably performed the best for me in terms of what I've seen in that GPS accuracy. So I've only done one run. I did a kind of 14k run. I had the Pace 3 on my left wrist, and then I had the Garmin Forerunner 965, and it's kind of a multi-band mode, which is kind of one of the best performing kind of multi-band kind of dual band modes that I've tested. And in terms of what I saw from the COROS Pace 3, all looked pretty good in terms of that first run. I kind of dug through into the kind of data to see how those kind of routes and kind of map routes kind of looked. They looked pretty good. The subsequent metrics that kind of, you know, came from it looked very similar to what I got from the Garmin. So from a kind of initial kind of GPS performance, it all looks pretty good to me in terms of that kind of dual band support. Obviously, like other watches that support modes like this, it's going to knock the battery life a little bit. I'll get into that, how that kind of performed in the battery section, but ultimately in terms of GPS performance, the metrics around that I saw around it, they all look pretty good and pretty much in line with what I saw with the Forerunner 965. So GPS looked pretty good for me. No major issues in that first run so far, but you know, as I kind of do a few more runs with it, maybe take it to a few more areas where that signal can be kind of challenged and just, you know, can be obstructed, whether it will still deliver that kind of good strong data and also the metrics that are tied to it, we'll find out. But so far so good for me on the COROS Pace 3 and its new dual band GPS mode.
On heart rate, I tested the Pace 3 optical sensor up against other optical heart rate sensors, a Polarity Verity Sense, a chest strap, and COROS's own heart rate monitor. And this is probably where the COROS Pace 3 struggled most in my early test. At times, it struggled for the first 10 minutes with a lot of high spikes as well during those runs. It was prone to high spikes throughout, really, and it often failed to pick up drops in HR as well when I stopped and had rest periods. Now, on one hiking test where you expect it to be able to cope on those low intensities, it really struggled getting locked on much higher BPMs for longer periods of time. And overall, it was a long way off the max and average heart rates, as well as being nowhere near how I felt in the moment.
So into that heart rate monitoring performance, now that is something that has changed on the Pace 3 compared to the Pace 2. You now have an upgraded optical heart rate sensor. You do still have the ability to pair external heart rate sensors as well too, if you don't trust that heart rate monitor data. Now, my experience with the Pace 2 has been pretty good overall. I think, you know, I always have a better experience with those kind of smaller running watches and sports watches in terms of that optical heart rate data and accuracy overall. Now, I've only done one run so far with the Pace 3. I did a pretty easy pace run, so what I really want to see is how it performs the kind of high intensity kind of efforts, which I haven't been able to, or haven't had time to do yet. But in terms of that steady pace run, I used it against the Garmin Forerunner 965 paired to a Garmin HRM Pro Plus chest strap monitor. And in terms of the average heart rate readings, the maximum heart rate readings, all look pretty good to me. And as I said, you know, for those kind of steady runs, the Pace 2 has performed pretty well for me. It looks like it's going to be more the same on the Pace 3. As I said, I really want to see how it performs in those kind of high intensity tests, which I haven't been able to do just yet. I've just had it for too small amount of time to be able to kind of fit that in. But as I said, in that one run I've been able to do, the heart rate data look pretty good, where, you know, some optical heart rate sensors can kind of struggle with even those kind of very gentle kind of paced runs, or where you're not going at your most, you know, your quickest or your fastest. So yeah, so far so good on the heart rate sensor performance. I would definitely like to see how it performs on those kind of high intensity efforts to see if those changes in the heart rate sensor technology has really made a difference overall.
Verdict then, so I'm not going to give you a verdict after less than a week with the COROS Pace 2. I'll save that for the full review. But here are my quick first impressions after 4 or 5 days using this watch. This is evolution, not revolution, with just a few tweaks here and there. Things we love to see, like longer battery life, are here. It's still light and compact. They haven't deviated much from the design. And for the price, it's still well built. And there's a nice simplicity to that feel of it, I think. The GPS was solid compared to much pricier watches, but not entirely infallible. The battery life pretty much lived up to billing, and this remains a real strength for COROS. It's way ahead in terms of its overall longevity than much pricier watches. The optical heart rate was one area where it wasn't great in our tests so far. It was probably more miss than hit. Overall though, I think the Pace 3 builds on the bang for buck strength of the Pace 2, but with more testing required.
So some initial thoughts on some pretty limited time with the COROS Pace 3, and it feels like a pretty nice update on the COROS Pace 2 so far based on my testing. Now, the Pace 2 is, I think, one of the best watches still available out there if you're looking for a very affordable kind of route into buying a running watch, if you're looking for good value for money as well, and obviously you're getting all the multi-sport functionality as well there too, so it's not just for running as well too. Now, in terms of the Pace 3, it has become more expensive than the Pace 2. It's gone above that kind of £200, $200 price mark. Now, what are you getting in return for that? Well, mainly you're getting that touchscreen functionality. You are getting, I would say, a kind of slicker software performance as well overall. You're getting that dual band GPS mode. You are getting that upgraded heart rate sensor, optical heart rate sensor. You're getting a built-in 4GB music player as well, if that's something you care about as well. And then all the kind of promises in terms of improved battery life across those kind of different kind of usage and scenarios as well too. So there are some reasons to maybe potentially think about upgrading, but I think, you know, if you're not that fussed about the dual band GPS mode, I think the music player, I think you're not that fussed about the software performance as well, then maybe there's that massive reason to upgrade from the Pace 2. And I still think that stands as a very good watch, but it does feel like that extra money you're spending does get you some nice features. Now, obviously things like breadcrumb navigation, and we are going to get turn-by-turn kind of support, which is kind of in beta at the moment. You know, that's going to roll out, or has already rolled out, on the COROS Pace 2, so that's still getting that functionality as well. So if that's something you care about, you could potentially pick it up on the cheaper watch. And then you look at the kind of more expensive COROS watches as well. Now you're going up to the Apex 2 and the Apex 2 Pro. Now the Apex 2 doesn't have that dual band mount, it's the Apex 2 Pro. That's going to get you probably nicer materials. You're going to get that full mapping support, which you don't get on the Pace 2 or the Pace 3 as well. So, and you're obviously going to get a bit more of a boost in battery life as well too, just because you've got a bigger watch and a bigger battery to kind of host there. But I think in terms of COROS's range, it feels like a nice update to the Pace 2, and also maybe, you know, it's gonna, if you're going to choose between this and something like the Apex 2 and you don't really care about the full mapping, then I think you're going to get good value from the Pace 3 ultimately. Looking at other watches that are out there around this price, as I said, it's kind of jumped in price, and it kind of moved away from things like the Garmin 455, and it's offering a lot more than the 55 in terms of that breadcrumb navigation, the dual band GPS mode. There's kind of music player features as well, if that's something you care about. You look at things like, as I said, the Garmin 455, which I think it's starting to kind of creep closer towards, and that's got you know, that's a very, very good watch. I think, you know, it kind of matches up pretty well on that front. I think maybe ultimately the Garmin ecosystem in terms of smartwatch features just works a little bit nicer, and that support that you're getting, so if that's something you care about, that would be maybe a reason to go for something like the 255, the 400 255. Whereas I think with the Pace 3, I think elsewhere in terms of the support, in terms of the metrics, in terms of what you're getting in terms of the dual band GPS mode here now as well, it kind of sits pretty well with that 255. So I think, yeah, the Pace 3 is a nice update to the Pace 2 overall. A watch that I think, you know, offers some nice updates on the previous watch. I don't think it entirely removes the need to go for the Pace 2 and make it feel like a good option to go for, but I think if you care, as I said, about having that dual band GPS mode, having that touchscreen functionality, that improved software, kind of running performance, a music player, some of those features that we've seen on the other COROS watches, then we're now going to get that in the Pace 3. I think, as I said, yeah, I feel like it's a nice update so far. I want to see how well that dual band GPS mode and things like the battery life performance and the heart rate performance at high intensity performs, to see whether it is a worthwhile and a huge kind of worthwhile upgrade over the Pace 2. But so far, feel like you know, it's been a nice watch to use so far, and I think, you know, this for me is the favorite of COROS's watches in its kind of collection, and I feel like it's going to be another one that's going to offer very good value for money, even though it's jumped up a little bit in price.
So there you have it. That's been my quick first look at the new COROS Pace 3. Hope you found it useful. We will do more in-depth testing. The rest of the team have watches in right now, and they are doing that testing as we speak, and as soon as we've done our usual rigorous drills and testing, we'll bring you the full review. So don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell to hear when that full COROS Pace 3 review lands. Hit us up in the comments below in the meantime if there's anything you'd like us to test specifically. Otherwise, it's been a pleasure to chat to you as always, and we'll hope to see you again soon on the run testers. Happy running, everyone. Good luck with whatever it is that you're doing out there.